You walk into a room and feel everything. The tension no one names, the words left unsaid, the smile that hides 1,000 wounds. You read between the lines, you feel before it's spoken. You sense when something's wrong, even when everyone says everything is fine. But the more you see, the more alone you begin to feel, because your perception separates you, your awareness isolates you, and your emotional depth, though powerful, often becomes the very reason you feel disconnected from the world around you. This video is for those who are not broken, but awake, for the women who don't belong in shallow spaces, for the souls who feel like they live in a world that doesn't speak their language. Today, we're going to name that loneliness, not the kind that comes from physical absence, but the kind that grows quietly inside the sensitive and the aware, the kind that says, with a soft ache in the chest, I feel everything, but no one seems to notice. Let's begin. The loneliness of awareness. There is a strange kind of grief that comes with awareness, not because it hurts to know, but because it hurts to know alone. You begin to see patterns others ignore. You notice shifts in body language, in energy, in emotional tone. You hear the heaviness in someone's voice when they say they are fine, and while others move on, you stay with what you felt. It stays in your body, in your breath, in your chest. At first it feels like a gift. You feel connected to something deeper. You feel tuned in to truth. But truth, when carried alone, becomes heavy. You want to share it. You try to speak it. You try to explain the language your heart speaks fluently. And yet the world answers in silence or confusion. They tell you you're too emotional, too intense, too complicated. So you quiet yourself. You carry the knowing silently, because to keep speaking feels like screaming into the wind. What grows inside you then is not self-doubt, but soul fatigue. You are not unsure of what you sense. You are just tired of being the only one who senses it. And sometimes, the silence of others becomes louder than any words. You enter conversations and feel the gap. You speak from depth and meet resistance. You share something real and are met with awkward smiles or subject changes. It teaches you to stay silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because your voice echoes in places where people are not yet willing to listen. The burden of emotional CLI rightwise. Do not only feel your own emotions, you feel the undercurrent of what others are trying to suppress. You enter a space and you read it without effort. You understand pain that has not been spoken aloud. You know when someone is pretending. You know when something is missing. And still, you show up with presence. You ask how they are. You offer warmth. You listen beyond the words. But slowly you begin to notice that the emotional space you hold for others is not something many know how to return. You are the one who checks in, the one who reaches out, the one who senses when something is wrong. But when the roles reverse, when you go quiet, when you withdraw to catch your breath, no one asks why. Not because they do not care, but because they are used to you being the strong one. They are used to your insight. They are used to receiving from you. They are not used to giving back. And that becomes its own kind of loneliness. Not the absence of love, but the absence of being held in the way you hold. There's a subtle heartbreak that grows in people who always show up for others, and are rarely met with the same depth. It's not just about reciprocity. It's about the hunger to be seen in the same way you see. You long for someone to notice without being told, to care without being reminded, to feel you without you having to explain yourself over and over again. When consciousness feels like a cage, you begin to grow in awareness. Something shifts. You start feeling more distant from the world around you. Conversations begin to feel empty. Connections begin to feel superficial. Your laughter feels forced in spaces that no longer reflect your truth. You are not angry. You are not superior. You are simply different now. The version of you that once tolerated shallow spaces has evolved. You have outgrown performance. You no longer want to pretend. You crave presence, truth, soul. And when that craving is unmet, you begin to withdraw, not to isolate, but to protect your energy, not to hide, but to find stillness, not to disappear, but to realign with your inner voice. And in that space of solitude, the ache arrives. You miss connection, but not any connection. You miss resonance. You miss feeling mirrored. You miss speaking and being heard beyond the surface. And that is where the quiet sorrow lives. In the gap between what you know is possible and what you continue to encounter. And yet, even in that ache, something else is born. You begin to find a sacred kind of companionship within yourself. You begin to listen differently. to breathe more slowly, to remember who you are without the noise. The invisible cost of seeing to a musiach to see clearly is powerful, but it comes with a cost. You cannot unsee. You cannot pretend. You cannot go back to being unaware. You begin to notice how much pretending exists in the world. How many relationships are maintained through illusion. How many people choose comfort over truth. And it starts to wear on your spirit. You want to connect deeply, but most people are still performing. You want to speak freely, but many are not ready to hear. You want to live fully, but the world often rewards what is filtered, and so you stand in this space between truth and silence. You want to be open, but you are tired of explaining. You want to be soft, but you are tired of being misunderstood. You want to belong, but not at the cost of your soul. And slowly, you learn to give that belonging to yourself, because waiting to be seen by those who choose not to look is a slow kind of self-abandonment, and now you are ready to stop waiting. If your mind sees what others miss and your heart carries what no one notices, there is a way to finally understand why. The JUNG method helps you decode the unconscious, reconnect with your emotional truth, and stop questioning your sensitivity. The link is in the pinned comment. The unnamed language of SNSITIV. We're never taught how to explain what you feel because the world rarely gave you the space to name it. There were no words for the heaviness that settles in your chest when the energy in a room changes. No definitions for the waves you feel when someone lies with a smile. No maps for the emotional territory you travel every day while others remain on the surface. So you adapted, you learned to carry what others avoided. You made yourself small to keep others comfortable. You mirrored their energy just to avoid being misunderstood again, but your sensitivity never left. It only grew quieter, and in that quiet, something sacred began to awaken. You started to notice patterns not just in people, but in yourself. How you overextended, how you stayed too long, how you excused absence because you feared rejection, how you confused loyalty with self-awareness became your compass, and though it came with loneliness, it also became your liberation because now you see clearly what you used to endure. Silently, WH in your energy makes others UNCOM4 or T-Bouter. Presence shifts the atmosphere not because you speak louder, but because your energy says what your words never need to. You notice when someone walks into the room angry before they speak. You feel the tension between people who claim to be fine. You sense jealousy in compliments. You sense grief behind perfection. You sense fear behind control, and when you bring it up even gently, people flinch, they get defensive, they deflect, they deny, not because you are wrong, but because you touched something real. They were not ready to face this. Is why people say, you're too much. This is why some distance themselves without explanation. This is why you are often loved quietly, but left loudly. Not because your sensitivity is a flaw, it's because your clarity holds a mirror, and not everyone is ready to look. Difference between alone and abaindio inadia is a specific pain in feeling alone, but there is a deeper ache in feeling emotionally abandoned while being physically surrounded. You can be in a relationship and feel invisible. You can be in a family and feel misunderstood. You can sit at a table full of friends and still feel a void inside you, because real connection doesn't come from words. It comes from being seen, being heard, being understood beyond what you explain. When that is missing, your soul begins to ache. You crave depth. You crave eye contact that doesn't flinch. You crave silence that feels safe. You crave questions that don't feel like interrogation. You crave answers that don't feel like defense. This is not neediness. This is alignment. You are not too much. You are simply asking for something deeper than the world around you has been willing to offer, and so your path begins to shift. You no longer crave crowds. You crave truth. You crave stillness. You crave stillness. You crave meaning, and that craving leads you inward to sacred. WITHDRAWAL. There comes a moment when the loneliness becomes too loud, and instead of fighting it, you surrender. You stop chasing conversations that leave you drained. You stop pouring into people who offer you drops. You stop begging to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding. You begin to pull back, not in anger but in protection. You no longer seek to be filled externally. You begin to fill from within. You start reading more. You write. You listen to the parts of yourself you used to silence. You sit with your own company and begin to recognize her wisdom. You start noticing what your body has been trying to say for years. The fatigue, the tension, the tightness in your chest. After certain conversations, you begin to trust it. In that sacred withdrawal, you begin to remember yourself, not the version shaped by who needed you to shrink, but the version that always knew RSCOG and ISGIA. Your old survival PATTRO does not come gently. It often arrives like a flood washing away all the illusions you built to survive you. Begin to see the ways you made yourself responsible for other people's emotions, the way you made peace by betraying your boundaries, the way you confused overgiving with love, the way you learned to anticipate needs that were never yours to meet, and, instead of judging yourself, you begin to forgive the version of you that didn't know better. She was doing her best. She was trying to belong. She was trying to feel safe in a world that punished sensitivity and praised detachment. Now you know better, and you begin to choose differently. You begin to say no. You begin to rest. You begin to stop explaining. You begin to feel the discomfort of being misunderstood without rushing to fix it, because you no longer live for approval, you live for alignment, and alignment means solitude sometimes, but it never means abandonment. WH in silence becomes your SANCTURY. There is a silence that isolates, and there is a silence that heals that first. Your silence came from exhaustion, from trying too hard, from speaking too much and being heard too little. But now your silence comes from peace, from clarity, from knowing your energy is sacred. You stop responding to noise. You stop defending your intuition. You stop engaging with people who only want the surface of you. Your silence becomes your sanctuary. Your softness becomes your shield. Your presence becomes a quiet revolution. You are no longer the girl who shrinks to be loved. You are the woman who knows that depth comes with solitude, but also with freedom, because when you stop begging to be seen, you start choosing who is worthy of seeing. You are sensitivity is your INTLOAG and CE. They told you you were too sensitive, but they never told you that your sensitivity was a form of intelligence, an emotional radar, a compass, a filter. You feel what others suppress. You name what others deny. You hold what others avoid, and that is not weakness, that is depth, that is perception, that is consciousness. The more you embrace it, the less you apologize for it. You begin to see that the world needs more of that awareness, more of that softness, more of that truth. You stop hiding it, you stop diluting it, you let it lead, because it is not your job to be more like them, it is your calling to be more like youth. Moment you become WHOLU are not meant to belong everywhere. You are not meant to be understood by everyone. You are not meant to make yourself smaller so others can feel bigger. You are meant to be whole, and wholeness sometimes means being alone, but never being lost. You begin to gather the pieces of yourself you once abandoned. You begin to write a new story, not one of pain, but of power, not one of silence, but of sovereignty, not one of rejection, but of redirection. The loneliness you once feared becomes the soil where your truth grows, where your strength rises, where your voice returns. And now you no longer beg to be seen. You walk in your light, and those who are meant to find you will meet you there.